There's also the value-added tax refund for the China Shanghai Construction Engineering Group Corp., as well as the value-added tax waiver for Hangzhou Innes Limited, ordered in 2022, along with the duties, taxes, and other payments exemption for the 12 Knights Templar LLC order, the duties, taxes, and other payments exemption for the Alfundi Investments Limited, as well as the Brent Eva Phillips order, the Caves of Barbados' Limited order, the Discovery Bay Beach Hotel Limited order, the Julia Cadogan order, the National Sports Council order, the estate of Robert Hatfield Ellsworth, the Rolando Garcia order, Stephen Tempro order, the Tabor Foundation Barbados order, and the TVX Barbados Inc. order. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I'm also commanded to lay duties, taxes, and other payments exemptions orders for Tyrone Davis, Vincar Limited, the Sovereign Counter Guarantee Contract, the China National Complete Plant Import and Export Corporation Limited, the Conservation Funding Agreement, and the Conservation and Sustainability Commitment Agreement orders.
Government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg that the Companies Economic Substance Amendment Bill be read a first time.
Questions that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me take the ayes of it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader of Government.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Questions that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 5. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security, to move the second reading of the Plant Protection Bill 2023. Call it 23.
Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to pilot this Plant Protection Bill 2022 as a means of getting us to where we need to be in terms of our sanitary and phytosanitary measures that will redound to us being able to trade globally, but also in keeping with our WTO sanitary and phytosanitary standards as established under the SPS agreement with WTO. Mr. Speaker, I spent Saturday frolicking with some friends of mine, and indeed the constituents that I thank every time for allowing me to speak in this honorable chamber. And in so doing, I sneaked in a few minutes to look at how we have arrived at where we are at this ethos in order for us to be able to pursue measures that are grounded, first of all, in voices of politics that would one day if not properly managed, come to grief. And equally, in trade matters that are oftentimes exploited if we are not careful with how we are maneuvering as it relates to trade and non-tariff barriers. And, Mr. Speaker, we find ourselves having to be able to deliver against a backdrop where when Barbados was expected to move along a path of globalization, that we were forced, Mr. Speaker, to reach standards that sometimes stretch us. And I believe that our sanitary and phytosanitary measures, which are balanced against the international standards, but equally are in sync with the model bills that were created at the CARICOM level, should give us enough capacity to be able to incentivize, encourage, and allow for trade to take place between Barbados and particularly our farmers in Barbados, our fisher folk, and indeed trade in general for export from Barbados, whilst at the same time allowing us to track and manage what is coming into this country. Mr. Speaker, these times are times when we have to also be extremely careful, since one, as I mentioned earlier, we have to manage the voices of politics, and as I said, that will one day come to grief, because if I am to go by what I am hearing, I am convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that after a government has been able to pull back an economy from the brink, being able to enter into a restructuring program with the IMF to make sure that, one, we can bring relief to the people of Barbados, two, that we can introduce a number of transformational measures to the people of Barbados to make sure that we create space and give options for people to participate. And I don't know how many other times I must repeat that this mantra for enfranchisement is one that we battled with and had to fight through the 70s under a Black Power movement, and then later well articulated by Professor Beckles when he spoke to a share of the economic pie of this country, if we are going to be able to give other Barbadians an opportunity to participate, since most of the wealth was concentrated, Mr. Speaker, in the hands of a few. What I've come to recognize as a person who have entered politics only because I saw the need to help with the enfranchisement of people, that I've had to tackle many issues within the Ministry of Agriculture that would allow for enfranchisement and empowerment to take place. As I look, Mr. Speaker, at what predated the SPS measures, we had, sir, an agreement called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or GATT, which was created in 1947. At the time of its creation, sir, when it was signed off, there were only 23 countries. And of course, you would know that Barbados would not have had a place there. Since then, many countries, particularly the developing countries, were able to use the GATT, one, as a means for building their economies, earning foreign exchange, and at the same time pushing back so that particularly small island developing states wouldn't be able to meet the standards and couldn't participate at a rapid pace. Now, I've heard several criticisms, sir, about how we must be able to move to such a nimble state that business facilitation should be as seamless and as easy as possible, and I agree, I concur. But sir, if we are to do so, it is legislation like this plant protection legislation that we need to have in place in order to give us the space to do exactly that. You see, without this type of legislation, Mr. Speaker, we are hamstrung because we don't have, first of all, guidelines and standards upon which we can depend. And so we will be continuously at the mercy of those who have the standards which we are not able to meet. Now, I've heard several conversations about clearing goods in the port, which I intend to address as well. And I've heard several conversations about what people want or what people regard as the ease of doing business without wanting to conform to what is critically necessary to create that ease and give us the space that we need as a country. Not set for an individual, nor one business, because were we to do that, then of course we will continue along the path where wealth remains in the hands of a few. Now, Mr. Speaker, the WTO sanitary and phytosanitary measures, when they were introduced to break down a number of the barriers that existed under the GATT, and at the same time give flexibility for countries to be able to object on the basis of science, sir, as it relates to plant protection. So that you couldn't necessarily try to block trade with a country simply by putting up some trade barriers or tariffs, etc., without first following the mandates of what is required under WTO. And that if there are objections, you're free to make objections, Mr. Speaker, but once it relates to sanitary and phytosanitary measures, they must be grounded in science. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that is where the difference is. So that, let's say, for example, and I try to make this as simple as possible by using a case in point. Barbados and Guyana entered into an agreement which is called the St. Barnabas Accord. And in that agreement, we flagged a number of things that we wanted to simplify and to allow for the two countries to be able to work together, particularly as it relates to my ministry, in order that we may be able to take advantage of the opportunities that are available to us in agriculture. So in those discussions, it was agreed that Guyana will give to Barbados a land of prosperity for us to be able to do germplasm, growing Barbadian cherries, growing soursop, passion fruit, plantains, yams, eddos, a whole set of fruits and root crops that we were struggling with. You can imagine you have Barbadian cherries, and we're struggling with Barbadian cherry tree, but in Roraima and Brazil, they have an abundance of Barbadian cherries, and in Ghana they have. So on this land of prosperity, we had to make sure that the phytosanitary measures were in place in order for us to bring in the planting material. Sir, you will not believe the headache that caused. Because in order for us to bring in these plants or germplasm, we had to make sure that Barbados was protected from pests and from crop diseases as well. And you may recall that I mentioned that both pests and disease tend to find their place among plants. And as we reach the stage where we expand our imports, we are at risk of bringing in more and more of these. Mr. Speaker, this clearly is a case of having a very robust border protection system in place that does not only speak to the movement of people, but also speaks to the movement of goods. And for us to be able to do that again, we must be able to have legislation of this type in place. Now, Mr. Speaker, when we went through the list of challenges we were asked to unpack in trying to settle an agreement with Guyana, which we have settled, by the way, we were dealing with people's interpretation in the first instance, using legislations and regulations in order to clear themselves and to protect themselves from taking risk. And it took leadership, sir, on both sides. Now, our Prime Minister and the President of Guyana were of the view that Barbados and Guyana can establish their own agreements, which falls well within the law, in order for us to have a seamless clearance of plants coming out of Guyana. And we then had to sit down and go through all the potential pests that we needed to mitigate against and possible diseases. That we were able to do, and then we developed a list. So now we can have one, prior disclosure of any new developments in terms of pests or any diseases, and at the same time allow for the seamless transfer or shipment of plants from Guyana to Barbados. We were able to receive planting material for eddos, for yam, and we were also able to receive from Guyana shade houses that are to be put up in order for us to do germplasm and increase farming. This, sir, is what I'm referring to as it relates to jurisdictions using whatever available opportunity they may find, depending on what it is that they're trying to protect, to restrict or deliberately block certain goods, plants in this instance, from getting into the country. Mr. Speaker, it is well known, and there's a case that can be researched, that Mexico, for example, which produces a whole lot of avocado, and was shipping to the US, found itself with phytosanitary challenges simply because they too were developing their own avocado crops and wanted to make sure that Mexico's avocados were either slowed down or stopped. And in that case, sir, the only trigger that could have been used was the phytosanitary measures that relates to pests that existed in Mexico. And that, would you believe it or not, reduced substantially the amount of avocados that were being shipped. So these things will always come back to challenge us. But once we have in place the prior declaration of any diseases or pests that exist, I believe that we are able to move at pace with the shipment of plants, shipment of animal products, shipment of goods generally. Now, I mentioned the port because I recall meeting with the stakeholders, and right across all stakeholders, I found myself having to deal with the expectations of clearing containers out of the port. And in those containers, particularly as it relates to the Ministry of Health and it relates to the Ministry of Agriculture, we found that if the information was submitted as required under the agreement, and particularly under the trusted trader arrangement, it would have been far easier to clear containers out of the port. What the plant pathology section of the Ministry of Agriculture is asking for is for information as it relates to what is coming in a container, so that when we do our checks, we are able to determine if there's any risk to Barbados prior to the shipment coming to Barbados. And oftentimes that can present some challenges. Equally, sir, when a shipment arrives here and it has to be cleared, if those documents are not uploaded fast enough on the system in order for us to be able to check, then that results in delays as well. So it takes for cooperation on both sides in order for us to create that ease of business that people are asking for. Now, I know with absolute certainty that the Plant Pathology Department of the Ministry of Agriculture does everything in its power to make sure they can clear as fast as possible any plant products that come into the country. Well, Mr. Speaker, there are some insects and some diseases that we simply cannot take chances with. And because they are close to our borders, we make sure that we do what is required to protect this country and to protect the people of Barbados and to protect our farmers. Now, Mr. Speaker, I am about to disclose some of the types of insects that can create havoc in this country and set us back completely without giving us a fair chance, sir, of being able to rebuild our agricultural sector. And I'm doing this, sir, because I believe that it's important, if we're doing a plant protection bill, that we seek to help people to understand why it is important for them to become compliant, but at the same time recognize the importance of having legislation in place that allows for us to be able to do better. Our bill is seeking, first of all, to amend the current 2007 Act, which is in line with the international standard of the WTO agreement on the application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Mr. Speaker, there is severe risk as it relates to crop loss in the agricultural sector. And if I am to quote from what is estimated at FAO globally, they say that up to 40% of losses occur in crop production annually. And they estimated a value of $290 billion each year, with plant diseases accounting for $220 billion, and invasive insects at least $70 billion. Sir, this is a huge sum. Mr. Speaker, they said further to these losses, the presence of weeds in cropping system can reduce yields up to 28%. so that if you have your yields falling, then invariably you're going to see losses as a consequence. And they have quoted that these losses, as it relates to growers in Australia, are somewhere around 3.3 billion, and in India, US 11 billion. In the US 33 billion. And these are the top three. Now, I suppose, Mr. Speaker, where I'm going now, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central will be happy, because I am about to reveal some of the insects and pests that can wipe us out. The Cyclist formicarius, sir, is an insect that affects sweet potatoes. And they have estimated that it can destroy from as small as 5% up to 97% of crops if not properly managed. There's also something called the Fusarium wilt, TR4. They said it is the most devastating disease affecting the banana industry globally. And that the overall estimated value of losses is somewhere between US $10 billion, sir. And then the one that frightens me is the Carpha beetle. This is an insect, sir, that can hide anywhere, including in your rug, between wood, on metal, in straw, sir, any place, including containers at sea. And it's a very destructive beetle, sir. This beetle is known to frequent the sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. And we trade, sir, globally. And therefore, we are at risk, and we need, sir, to be able to anchor this where we protect Barbados. Now, these don't only affect in the reduction of yield, sir, but can you imagine having then to use a sort of pesticides profile in order for us to be able to control or even manage these types of pests? Sir, that pesticides profile can also be devastating to the environment, and in particular to water runoff that invariably makes its way into the sea. So whilst this stuff may be boring stuff to most people, the responsibility is still upon us to make sure that we can deal with these matters and do so effectively. Currently, we don't have any of these pests in Barbados. Therefore, it is important for us to note that with this type of legislation, we will continue to protect our plant biodiversity. And generally, Barbados' biodiversity, because a plant is a plant is a plant when all is said and done. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I believe that in order for us to be able to manage and secure producing healthy food, because that's the genesis upon which all of this is built, that at the end of the day, the conversation around sanitary and phytosanitary measures are about how we produce safe food for consumption. And therefore, sanitary as it relates to animals and human beings, and phytosanitary as it relates to plants. These measures, sir, when addressed at WTO, had certain key features that I will seek to briefly go through. And sir, I am reading from a document called Understanding WTO Agreement on Sanitary and Phytosanitary Measures, which I'm willing to make as a document of the House. The key feature, sir, is for all countries to maintain measures to ensure that food is safe for consumers and to prevent the spread of pest disease among animals and plants. And therefore, the sanitary and phytosanitary measures can take many forms, such as requiring products to come from a disease-free area, as we will all prefer to do, inspection of products, specific treatment and processing of products, and then setting of allowable maximum levels of pesticide residue or permitted use of only certain additives in food, sir. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, when we considered how we would go about having this legislation prepared, the CPC was of the view that rather than seek to do several amendments across existing legislation that would have been fairly cumbersome, that we repeal and come with a fresh set of legislation. Hence the reason why I gave you the Animal Health and Veterinary Public Health Bill in December, and now I'm doing this Plant Protection Bill. And to follow this would be the food safety legislation as well. Now, I would have loved to be able to do all three as a cognate debate, but unfortunately, we weren't there, and we had to move this process along. Now, under these measures, sir, several questions have been raised as it relates to whether or not it is protection or protectionism. And I believe that those are fair questions to ask, because we live in a world where I still see, and the Honourable Member for St. James South can speak to this as well, I still see when we go to the Quartet or in several of our meetings as it relates to tariff and tariff barriers, the craftiness and oftentimes the slippery maneuvers, sir, in order for advantages to be given to certain jurisdictions. And you have to be clever and you have to call it for what it is. I remember when we were dealing at the last FAO conference in, what was it? Was it Uruguay? In Quito. Sir, that was as robust as it possibly can get, because the ministers of agriculture from CARICOM were adamant that CARICOM could not be treated the same way that you treat the Argentina or Brazil or South America, even though we have South-South cooperation, because the economic activities that are generated within those countries, we will never be able to match, even if we take all of CARICOM and pull it together. And so that conversation became such that we coined the phrase then, CARICOM must be different, CARICOM must have its own space. And as we pursued that, sir, we met resistance upon resistance from Argentina and Brazil until we were able to break the back of it and allow for CARICOM to be considered as a zone that needed special treatment, sir. And therefore, the question, protection or protectionism, to my mind, is a fair one. But this is addressed, sir, under the standard or international standards with WTO, as by their very nature may result in restrictions on trade, and that all governments accept the fact that some trade restrictions may be necessary to ensure food safety and animal and plant health protection, sir. And Barbados, sir, will be no different, because We cannot afford to allow things to cross our borders and enter this country without having the requisite protection and systems in place to deal with that. So I always ask the question, how do I strike a balance between ease of doing business and being able to protect the country? And so that must be a Herculean task, because you're talking about people who are investing their money and expect to have their goods by a certain time. And equally, you're talking about the responsibility being placed on a ministry and officers within that ministry to do exactly what these measures are asking us to do in terms of us doing prior declaration, but at the same time receiving from other jurisdictions, sir. And that when those don't happen, then you have the challenge of having to be as rigorous as possible in doing all your searches. Now, it hurts me whenever I hear about plants or any plant-based products coming to Barbados from CARICOM and are held up in the port. And that is one that I tend to personally make sure that I ask what is happening or raise at my management meetings, because I feel that jurisdiction by jurisdiction, we can be far more non-linear than we are. But, Mr. Speaker, in order for us to achieve that, it also takes cooperation between member states as well. So the agreement on sanitary and phytosanitary measures builds on what I mentioned earlier, which is the gap. And it restricts the use of unjust sanitary or phytosanitary measures for purposes of trade protection, sir. So that in as much as you're putting measures in place to protect your plant biodiversity, you at the same time cannot exploit those measures in order for you to restrict trade. And I did speak to the case of Mexico earlier. Now, when they look at how these measures can be justified, they say that why is permitting governments to maintain appropriate sanitary and phytosanitary protection, it reduces the possibilities of arbitrariness of decisions and encourages consistent decision-making, sir. And that is why standards are important, because we're building against standards, sir, that allows for us to have consistency, but at the same time, it takes away arbitrariness to allow for people to have advantage. Mr. Speaker, we are at a stage now where Barbados is about to increase its sugarcane production so that we can, one, produce more molasses for the rum industry, and at the same time, give us an opportunity to export more crystal sugar and allow for us also to go to renewable energy. Mr. Speaker, we have something in Barbados called ratoon stunting disease. Ratoon stunting disease affects sugarcane. And if you drive around Barbados and you look at some sugarcane, you can easily detect the ones that are suffering a ratoon stunting disease. Sir, they are stunted at best. They are very slim, looking more like bamboo, and the crops don't yield, neither do you get good growth. In order for us to be able to address this, we had to introduce a hot water treatment system that allows for planting material to be treated in the hot water treatment system to get rid of that disease. Think, sir, for a moment of us having to treat many more diseases that would affect our plants, and think, sir, of us having to use more control systems, including pesticides, in order to deal with pests in our crops, sir. And to my mind, the best way for us to be able to do this is to make sure that we have settled for ourselves what is required, particularly in the agricultural sector. The Minister of the Environment will speak to the environmental protection measures and the measures that seek to make sure that we protect our soils and give us good fertility as well. And I do know that between the two ministries, we are working with the Moroccans in order to address our soil issues. And I do also know that I am to call upon him for some funds that are supposed to come to my ministry, which I urgently need in order for us to continue our work. And I am not using, sir, this space to call upon him. It just happened that it falls right in line where I was about to play my shot. Mr. Speaker, we have to look, first of all, at how we address the issues of plant growth, how we address the issues as it relates to soil giving us yields, how we address the issues of climate change impacting on plant growth and plant biodiversity. Now, I am not a technical person in agriculture, but I sit through enough meetings to hear when they talk about breaking hard pan and fixing allometric ratios so that a plant branch should grow in sync with the roots if you're going to have a proper plant, and that you should be able to detect in the quickest time possible whether or not that plant is being affected by some pest or disease simply because of the growth and the characteristics that the leaves may take on, or even the branches. And you all may recall that there was a stage in Barbados when we had the giant African snail entering this country. And what a mess that was, sir. You had some commentators saying that we should eat them, that they're delicious, but they didn't understand that Bajans don't have a palate for that type of culinary culture. And then it was also recommended that we give a bounty in order for us to eradicate or reduce the population. And so we were doing our best, sir, but at the same time, that giant African snail didn't originate in Barbados. It originated outside of Barbados and came here, obviously, with some kind of shipment. Now, there are people who also want to bring seeds. So you have some farmers who may come to you and say, I don't understand. They got 3 varieties of cucumber that I want to try. I went to Trinidad and I bought some. But would you believe your people at plant quarantine took the seeds from me? You didn't ask for a phytosanitary certificate. You did not even inform plant pathology that you were bringing the seeds. And therefore now we must make a decision as to whether or not to release those seeds. I will say 2 things, sir. 1, with this legislation, we will know if Trinidad got problems or not, so it should solve that problem. The other thing is that if people are cognizant of the fact that there's legislation that they must follow, that would also solve the problem. Because if you fail to follow the legislation, then you suffer the consequences. But the good takeaway from all of it is that once jurisdictions are able to agree on those plants that can clear without a problem and disclose all pests or diseases that are affecting the jurisdiction, there should be no reason why a person can't come in with 4 mangoes from Dominica in his bag or suitcase and be able to walk through the airport. Because I too also had a complaint from a good friend of mine who told me he had some delicious mangoes from Dominica and they were confiscated at the airport. And the man is still angry up to this day. But there are some diseases, and there are some pests, sir, that can come with mangoes. And therefore, it was just a case of making sure we didn't import those into Barbados. Now, what happened with those mangoes, I don't know, but I want to believe, sir, that they were destroyed. And how they were destroyed, I'm not about to get into the methodology. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central seems to understand, because he's the finance man. He knows the economics of these things. So destroying 4 mangoes may lead to the hunger of someone else. And that to my mind, makes perfect sense. But for me, if we were to deal with the seriousness of the matter, sir, again, if we had prior disclosure and were able to settle with that jurisdiction on what pests they may have affecting the country or what diseases are there, we are able then to better maneuver. The purpose of the SPS agreement or the sanitary and phytosanitary measures are defined as any measures applied, 1, to protect human and animal life from risks arising from additives, contaminants, toxins, or disease-causing organisms in their food. To protect human life from plant or animal carried diseases, and this is one that we need to understand because there are certain zoonotic diseases, sir, that we can be impacted by, and equally the consumption of certain plants as well can contribute to problems within our digestive systems. The beetle that I spoke to earlier, sir, that beetle can actually give you intestinal problems. And it can also give you other problems, including problems with your hair, etc. So it is not a pest that we would like to get here in Barbados because we are too small. It is also to protect animal or plant life from pests, diseases, or disease-carrying organisms, and to prevent or limit other damage to a country from the entry, establishment, or spread of pests, and it's as simple as that, sir. Our legislation, sir, was set and balanced and agreed upon with what we have before CARICOM. And Mr. Speaker, the Surinamese government has been able to execute most of this extremely, extremely well. Guyana has done a very good job as well. Trinidad and other member states are also working on theirs to bring it in line. Mr. Speaker, this Plant Protection Bill 2022, which was, as I said earlier, was supposed to be an amendment to the Plant Protection Bill, and it would have amended Plant Protection Act Cap 268 of 2007 and the Plant and Pest and Disease Eradication Act Cap 266A of 1985. But because of the magnitude of the changes that had to take place, then it was recommended that we come with a completely new act. So what it is we're doing. The main areas in the Plant Protection Bill 2022 to be highlighted will be Part 2, which deals with the administration. And this is at page 16 of the Act. This section establishes, sir, for the first time in Barbados, what will be a National Plant Protection Organization, or what is referred to as an NPPO in the global language used. And it states at clause 5.1 that the NPPO shall be headed by a chief plant health officer. And of course, this is a post that will be established to head that entity when it is created. It delineates all the functions of the MPPO, which includes developing a list of regulated pests and preventing and controlling introduction of these pests. And then, sir, at clause 10.1 of the bill, it also establishes an advisory working group, which is absolutely necessary if we are going to address issues of the ease of doing business and issues of trade barriers, sir. And this working group should advise the minister and the MPPO on issues of plant protection. The advisory working group differs significantly from the advisory council established under the existing act, for whereby the council perform functions of the MPPO, the working group shall be responsible for 1, advising of phytosanitary policy, making recommendations for the enactment of legislation. 2, 3, assisting in the determination of criteria for the declaration of a phytosanitary emergency. 4, serving as a mechanism through which emergencies can be coordinated under the technical leadership of the Chief Agriculture Officer. And 5, serving as a mechanism for the coordination and consultation among public entities or between public and private entities for the purpose of scientific advice on phytosanitary matters. And I can't emphasize enough that these measures are grounded, sir, in science simply because they are not to be exploited. The working group should include in its membership 1 person, each representing interests of importers and exporters. So importers will have a say. They will sit with the working group, and equally those who are into exports as well. And that will certainly strengthen the stakeholder representation and ensuring their participation in the MPPO matters. At part 6 of the legislation, which deals with enforcement at page 47, clause 9 of the bill makes provision for a 2-tier system of review where any person, if aggrieved by a decision or action taken by a plant protection inspector or an official analysis, that person can have a review. In addition, subclause 5 provides that an aggrieved person reserves the right to appeal to a judge in chambers on matters relating to law. And subclause 6 requires that the MPPO act in a timely manner in responding to an appeal involving a regulated pest or a perishable item, sir. So equally, what we have been able to determine here is that out of consultation with our stakeholders, out of consultation with the importers, sir, out of consultation with the Barbados Chamber of Commerce, out of consultation with supermarkets, sir, we were able to establish mechanisms through which people have a right to be able to appeal or go to court. These rights are absent in the other legislation, sir. Part 8, which really is to do with miscellaneous at page 60, it explains, sir, in clear terms, why we went straight to the repeal and to come with new legislation. Now, having outlined those, Mr. Speaker, I want to speak for a bit on agriculture, challenges, sir, with crops, and equally challenges, sir, with supply chain logistics that will impact our very existence today. Now, Mr. Speaker, We are constantly talking about climate change, climate change, climate change. And it is coming across very clearly to me that this conversation is taking place at a level where the country has a consciousness in its leadership in dealing with climate change. But I find that that consciousness among people who are involved in crop production and livestock production has not yet reached the point where they see climate change as something that they need to mitigate strongly and to put systems in place to manage. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because you will note that there's a hue and cry whenever there's a flood in Barbados. But we have available to us at the Agricultural Development Fund funds through which people can bring a project in order for them to be able to use new systems in agriculture to mitigate against flooding, sir. And I'm talking about the use of greenhouses and shade houses. And at the same time, mitigate against crop diseases and pest infestation as well. And these things are with us for as long as we have to live with what is happening in climate change, sir. Climate change, sir, will continue to increase the amount of diseases in plants and animals, and will continue to increase the amount of pests that will reach our borders at some point in time if we don't have management systems in place to protect us. When I dealt, sir, with African swine fever, I made it abundantly clear that all Barbadians must get on board if we are going to successfully protect this country from any instance of African swine fever. I made the point, sir, that the only way we are going to be severely at risk is when people seek to smuggle things in the country. Because if you're following the protocols as it relates to getting your certificates before importing, you will be told clearly jurisdictions that we should avoid. It breaks my heart to tell you that one jurisdiction that had African swine fever, someone wanted to bring pork from that jurisdiction. And sir, it is this type of behavior that will invariably lead us to problems down the road. On the other hand, sir, there are other types of innovative ways people can go about agriculture in order that they may get better yields, increase soil fertility through the reduction in the use of pesticides, and at the same time use bio-inputs in order that we can have enough predators to be able to deal with insects and at the same time protect our biodiversity. Things like mulching, for example, which we all grew up seeing, and spreading plastics over soil, one, to retain the moisture in the soil, and at the same time gives for us an opportunity to reduce the amount of weed that may grow up. And we do need weed, we need the good weed, that's why we have the BMCLA. But the other types of weeds we don't need. And that type of practice, sir, will allow for farmers to reduce the amount of pesticides that we are putting into the environment and putting into our soils, and at the same time give us a chance to protect our biodiversity and also protect our blue economy as well, because a number of these pesticides, the residue, will invariably end up in the ocean because Barbados is surrounded by water, and many of our farming districts, sir, are close to the ocean. Bath and St. John is one. In St. Lucie, for example, St. Andrew, right across Barbados. And if it is not going into the ocean, then invariably it can make its way into the aquifer, sir. So that in order for us to be able to treat to these matters, I think the issues of climate and how we are required to move to new systems is one that we are targeting at the ministry. We have just put a working group in place, and we are going to make sure that we bring farmers along. But I want to send one clear message to the country, sir. And that message is the ministry is doing all that it can. But those who are involved in the sector must also pull some weight. And we have made funds available through the Agriculture Development Fund for people to be able to move to new systems. Mr. Speaker, I also want to speak to the fact that, and I'm very conscious of the fact that there are some persons who love pets and who keep certain types of plants, be it ornamentals or be it plants for food. And many times, sir, you have cases where they are exchanged either by a friend coming in and bringing in the suitcase or in a bag, either the seeds or products from a plant, sir. And they're not declared at the airport, and everything is not going to be found. Sir, those practices I'm urging people to stop, because we cannot afford to take the risk of bringing diseases or pests into this country that we are not going to be able to manage. Now, I mentioned the beetle that is extremely destructive, and I'm happy to report that it is not in Barbados. But I want to also emphasize the fact that only the experts, the people who have the full knowledge in dealing with these things, can tell you where to avoid and how to avoid, and therefore it's incumbent upon everybody to please go through the system. Do not try to beat the system. And this legislation, sir, will make it far easier now for people to be able to bring in any amount of seeds from jurisdictions where we have clearance, plants, plant products, all those things. We are now going to be able to move far more seamlessly than we were before. But on the other side of it as well, we're going to be able to trade easier. We're going to be able to export as well. And currently we are establishing under the ministry increased production in sweet potato in order for us to export sweet potatoes to the UK. And that conversation is currently ongoing. It is ongoing with the farmers. It is also ongoing with a consultant within the United Kingdom. And we are about to make sure that we provide greater capacity in the production of sweet potatoes in order for us to be able to export sweet potatoes. We are about to establish increased germplasm with varieties of sweet potatoes. And we have been importing planting materials, sir, to make sure that farmers get other varieties and to keep the planting material clean. This responsibility the ministry undertakes. The ministry works as well with farmers to make sure that wherever they are importing from, that there's either clearance or knowledge of what pests or diseases are there, and the ministry is providing assistance in helping farmers to get their planting material as well. Mr. Speaker, I'm here to tell you that, as you know better than I do, the legislation will only take us so far. But after that, the rest is up to those who are executing and those who are using the legislation, sir. And so, Mr. Speaker, I feel that we have come far enough in dealing with our SPS measures. And I have to say to this Honourable House, sir, that, you know, it took more than 14 years to get this here, you know, sir. You can imagine that? This is a process that started well over 14 years, where either there was territorial confusion within ministries, whether the nimbleness and the will to do wasn't always there, whether there were other challenges. Resources as well was one, even though we did have some help from the IDB. And, Mr. Speaker, over 14 years of dealing with this in order for us to get here. But we are here now, sir, and that is the most important part. The other piece of this that will come to this Parliament shortly, sir, will be the food safety legislation, as I mentioned earlier. And then all of our importers and exporters should be in a very good position to increase trade and look for new opportunities in order for our people to be enfranchised. Now, I am on record for saying, with no apology, that people constantly speak about restructuring the economy, but they want to put new wines in old skins. And it's not going to happen. I don't care all the pretty talk, all the fancy talk, criticize me all you want. What I have is that I have seen with my own two eyes, felt with my own heart, worked my own brain to see a business that I had owned having to go through good times and bad times. And Mr. Speaker, I'm telling you, if we are going to restructure Barbados' economy, it first, at its foundation, must start with new opportunities. Then you can build the pillars of success around that. But you dare not tell me that you want to restructure an economy and you keep telling me about tourism. You keep telling me about all those other things that we have done well with. We may have to make changes. We have to go the extra 9 yards to meet the 21st century expectations and to keep abreast with the changes. But if you are not creating new opportunities and new industries, sir, you are restructuring no economy. And that is my position on that. Whoever chooses to criticize me can criticize me all they want, because I've seen it with my own two eyes, sir. When we had to go to a process of innovation throughout this Caribbean region, I led the conversation, and that was within the travel trade. I'm not talking travel though, but I have to digress in order to make the point. Everybody wanted to take an instrument like this, thick, huge thing, in order to come up with the calculation of an airfare. You can imagine the amount of pages. You set down a long chart. You had to calculate. You had to make sure you got the most competitive. You then had to apply all kinds of rules in order to come up with an airfare. And then just so, Cable and Wireless came up with a system called Tarex. And at the press of a button, airfare calculated, sir. That created new opportunities in the travel trade for all of the reservation systems that we have in existence today. And this is what I'm referring to, sir, when I say that when you create new opportunities, that is how you start to restructure. If that is not a good enough example, the economists can find one. But I am prepared to challenge anyone who is prepared to tell me different. And Mr. Speaker, it is against that, sir, that I am saying to you that when we finish this suite of legislation for sanitary and phytosanitary measures, we are creating new opportunities for fishing. We are creating new opportunities for those who are doing crops. We are creating new opportunities for those who are doing livestock, because they will have opportunities now over and beyond what is currently in existence by way of the opportunities to export, sir. And that is why we're doing the work we're doing, to put in a food terminal, to put in a pack house, sir, and to provide innovative solutions in terms of storage and packaging, etc. Those, to my mind, will represent the transformational work that is required in order for us to take full advantage of this type of legislation, sir. And I strongly believe that my voice has been heard enough. There isn't much more that I can do in terms of presenting this, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move. Sorry, I'm obliged to you and beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I just want to rise and to give my unreserved support to the member who just spoke, my colleague from the rustic constituency of St. Philip South. I want to say this legislation, this bill, the Plant Protection Bill 2022, is a life changer for those who operate in the plant geographical space that I operate in as Minister of the Environment, and those who understand the importance of the earth and all its constituents, and all its factors. Mr. Speaker, sir, I came up with a maxim in my ministry. Trees save lives. And when that maxim came to me, probably in the wee hours of the morning, I must be able to tell Barbadians it was not something like a kindergarten, chicken licking, foxy loxy or henny penny moment. It was a serious reflection for me of the importance of trees as it relates to the survival of both flora and fauna. The survival of the earth, basically. And when I said that it must be the new maxim or axiom, however you look at it, the new philosophy for Barbadians, I said so without apology because I understand that trees and the ability for them to survive the test of time, but basically redound to us being able to ensure that our children survive that test of time, and their children, and their children's children. That is what it basically means for me. And hopefully, that is what it means for most Barbadians. So when a minister of agriculture is able to redefine that which existed in 2007, to the extent that he's bringing legislation that speaks to sanitary and phytosanitary means, legislation that looks at biosecurity, legislation that ensures that what comes into our island meets the standard that we expect as Barbadians in terms of having the right stock, having an festive free stock, having a stock that is able to do that which it is intended to do, and have the mechanisms and the wherewithal for that stock to be tested using international standards. That is what this legislation seeks to do. It seeks to ensure that what comes into this country as plant stock, genetic material, whatever you call it, that it is able to be subject to international scrutiny. And so, by this legislation, what the minister has basically done is to ensure that there is a seamless and effortless process of getting that much needed variety of flora into this country as easily and freely as possible. The importance of this. Mr. Speaker, sir, since the industrial world began, 250 years plus ago, we have lost about 600 plus of our plant species. 600 plus species of plants that were integral to the biodiverse survival of the earth. Integral to the survival of our forestry. Integral to the survival of certain animals. Integral to the survival of certain geographical spaces. We have lost over 600 plant species. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I speak, 800 plus plant species are being threatened. 800 plus. Important species. I was in St. Joseph the other day, a parish that is near and dear to my heart. Some would accuse my neighbor string of being buried there in the geographical strata. I am not sure. But there is a connection to me in St. Joseph. Unequivocally, I would call myself, if I was a neologist today, as a Christchurch Josephine. I have a member of Parliament of St. Joseph allow me to do so. But I was in St. Joseph the other day, and I saw fireflies. I cannot remember the last day I saw fireflies. I can't remember. It was an amazing sight to see them in the atmosphere, making all types of shapes. It was like dancing on the stars, Mr. Speaker, sir. Everyone can carry that imagination past the stratosphere. It was an amazing sight. Fireflies. And I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, I would love the day where Barbadians are able to go. I'm not saying they have to be Waterford, Boulevard, and that oasis called the Botanical Garden, which you are familiar with, Mr. Speaker. And you were able to enjoy the beauty and be able to balance your humors down there only recently with those in the dawn of their lives. I am saying to you, Mr. Speaker, imagine we can have a firefly garden in Barbados where Barbadians will go and appreciate those insects as they illuminate light in a special way. Imagine it, Mr. Speaker. Certain butterflies, as we know them. The only way you can have these things, being able to survive the test of time and being able to be part of our geographical space, Mr. Speaker, is if there is an active and vibrant plant life. And that can only happen if we have legislation that allows the variety of these plants to pass our borders in a safe way. That is where the biosecurity and biosafety come into play. And that is why this legislation speaks to ensuring that there are the phytosanitary mechanisms in place, that there are the right plasmic material, and that we have the germplasm facilities here to be able to test this material at the international level. That is what this legislation speaks to, so that we can have the firefly gardens and the butterflies that are now being threatened. I am saying to you, Mr. Speaker, along with the food security that the minister spoke of, the mango that some person else digested, unfortunately, and not him. Those types of things coming into our borders to enhance our food security also enhances, for me, the environment. Simply put, since the industrial era, we have lost a lot of our forests by desertification, deforestation. Since the industrial era, we have had an increase in chemical pollution. Since the industrial era, we have, Mr. Speaker, seen an increase in that harmful carbon dioxide, which is the leading greenhouse gas. Lucky for us in Barbados, we produce about 2 million tons. We have said to the international world, based on our national determined contributions, by the year 2030, the latest, we would be able to extract from the atmosphere, based on our policies in the energy sector, what is happening in the transport sector, and of course what is happening in my ministry with the carbon sinks. By the year 2030, that we will be able to tell those in the international committee that we will be fossil fuel free at best, and that carbon neutrality, which is now a misnomer, will be something that Barbadians will look to achieve. That's what we'll be able to tell the international world. At least about 93.7% or so of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that we may be able, on the right path, to be able to remove. That is what we are going to tell the international world. But this can only happen if there is a vibrancy. If there is a vibrancy and a commitment on our part to increase both the green carbon sink, which exists on our, or we call it the Earth or the lithosphere as we know it, and the blue carbon sink, which exists in the ocean or reefs, buttressed, of course, by our coral. Right now, as we speak, Barbados, with the limited forestry that we have, in rustic Barbados, the countryside, of course, we are able to remove from our atmosphere about 20 to 25 to 30% at best of our carbon dioxide. Anything between 500,000 tons or so per year, we are able to do that with our carbon sink. Imagine with the phytosanitary condition, with this bill that seeks to protect our plant and allow the ease of import of different types of seeds and plasmic stock. Imagine if we are able to improve our green carbon sink and raise that percentage to 40, 50%. What it would do to our overall ability to be able to sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And if we do the same thing in the ocean with the blue carbon sink, then our noble goal of reaching as fossil fuel, as carbon neutral as possible by the year 2030 could be easily realized. That is why this legislation is so important. That is why it's so important. It gives us the ability to improve our stock profile in this country. It allows us to have the variety that is needed. They have certain plants, Mr. Speaker, sir, whose basic function is to store water. The baobab tree, we only have about 5 in this country. 5, unfortunately, because they are pollinated they have nighttime, their flowers come out at night, and they're pollinated by bats. When is the last time you see a bat, Mr. Speaker? or loss of biodiversity. Persons don't understand that when we destroy these things in an ecosystem, whether it's animals, plants, insects, whatever, that they have they're called a consequence and an effect and a homeostatic there on other things in the ecosystem. That is what they don't understand. So when you kill the bats, then you can't pollinate the baobab tree by pollinating the flowers, and hence the ability for us to increase that stock is depleted. It is a circular effect. And that's what we have to understand. Every action causes a reaction. It's similar to the systems in our body, the homeostatic system. When outside it's hot, the air on the surface of our skin rises so that air can pass on and cool the system. Negative feedback mechanism. The same thing happens in a wider ecosystem. When you affect one thing, animal or plant, it affects another. So what we are trying to do is bring that balance to the system by improving the stock, whether it's the animal stock or the plant stock. So that is why it's important for us to have these biosecure and protective measures by this plant protection bill that the good minister is trying to achieve today in this August chamber. It makes sense. Not only scientific sense, but good old Bayesian common sense, man. It makes sense. It makes, according to the member of parliament who survived the test of time because she is now on the verge of being an octogenarian, it makes good old survival sense, man. That's what it means, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have to be serious if we intend to be able to mitigate, militate, and adapt to the vagaries of climate change. That is what it boils down to. And it is no fault, Mr. Speaker, of the earth. So don't blame the earth for what is happening. It has started since the industrial trust. It started when we decided that our hands could not do it alone. That the cottage industry and all the other industries must be buttressed by machinery. And with machinery comes what? The use of fossil fuel. With machinery comes what? More material being dumped. With machinery, you have the ability to destroy forest, man. Deforestation. With machinery, increase in pollution, chemical and other ways going into the atmosphere. So it is no fault of the earth. The earth ain't do it on its own. It is mankind, along with the anthropogenic behaviors of mankind too. Because as much as the minister is seeking to bring the stock needed and have those phytosanitary measures to ensure that what we do here in Barbados does not affect the citizens of this country. And when they buy the mango, for instance, they know that that mango is not unhealthy and it doesn't have any diseases, etc. That is what he's trying to do. But at the same time, I, as a minister of the environment, must be able to tell Barbadians that the scourge of illegal dumping, the scourge of chemical dumping, the scourge that we have in this country by destroying our trees, our plants, and our biological diversity, that scourge must come to a screeching halt. I make no apologies. As Minister of the Environment, none at all to anybody in Barbados, including the young lady who bore me. She's going to be an octogenarian now. Make no apology in saying that those persons who continue to destroy our environment with illegal dumping, the Member of Parliament of St. Thomas is perfectly correct. I happened to visit her constituency, not because it is near to St. Joseph St. Andrew, the place where I was born and raised as an impressionable young man. But I happened to visit her because she made a call and appeal to me, Minister, come and see for yourself, man, what is happening in these gullies and our ecosystem. I happened to visit St. Thomas with her with a team from NCC who work assiduously for the better part of a week to clean the area. She know the area better than me. It's juice and what's not, butts and whatnot. And within a couple of days, illegal dumpers came and destroyed that which we seek to clean up and beautify. I am sorry that those perpetrators were not caught. And I'm imploring Barbadians, because we got a habit of putting every single thing on social media. We have a habit of doing it. An unfortunate habit of doing it. So there's an accident. There is an accident in Barbados. A person is on the verge of death, and somebody will come with the scene of the accident and put it and spread it out all over social media, so that the person's family will get the shock of their lives to see their loved one trapped in a car, probably in the worst form of their life. And we find pleasure. We are enthused and excited for doing that to be able to post that type of activities. But when you have persons dumping illegally, you ain't sharing it. You ain't putting it up on social media. Huh? Those are the things to put on social media to shame those who are destroying the environment. Because you can't have a song by the Merry Man called Beautiful, Beautiful Barbados. A beautiful group too. Beautiful, Beautiful Barbados. An idyllic song by an iconic group. Speaking about how beautiful Barbados is. And on the other hand, you have persons involved in all types of activities to destroy the aesthetics of this country. I am saying today an abhorrent no to this type of behavior. This is what's destroying the environment. This is what is destroying the work of the Minister of Agriculture when he speaks to the plant protection bill and how we should protect those plants and ensure that they come into this country to add to the variety, to increase our food security, and to do all those things that plants do. The multiplicity of functions, the cooling of the air, the trapping of dust. What happened to Barbados when we had the volcanic ash? You had dust all over the place, but you know what happened? A lot was trapped by the leaves of the plants. Imagine if we didn't have those plants around our homes, how much dust would come into our homes to affect us? Imagine it. The ability to take the harmful nitrates and phosphates from the soil and inadvertently our water supply. They act as natural filters. The same plants that the minister is trying to get here and ensure that we get the right stock. The same plants that we trying to protect are responsible to protect us from the erosion, whether it is near shore or in rustic Barbados, the Scotland district, with the vetiver grass and the lemongrass, etc., those that have the horizontal root network. The ability, Mr. Speaker, for those climate-resistant plants to store water. The ability for plants to provide a natural habitat for other animals. The ability for those same plants. Because we talk about the ability of plants and why it is important this legislation, other legislation, comes to the fore to protect this country. The ability of plants. And they spoke about the industrial world and the effects of the industrial world, to be able to sequester in a natural way carbon dioxide from our atmosphere. Until we could bring a project like what happened last year or year before in the exosphere in Mars, a project called MOXIE, where we are able to recycle carbon dioxide and change it to oxygen. Unless that is able to happen here, the most natural way of reducing our carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is by the plants. Whether it's those on the bottom of the ocean called the blue carbon sink, when you look at the phytoplankton and what's not at the bottom of the ocean, that variety of flora, or the ones in the green carbon sink as it relates to the earth. Plants are the most natural sequesters of carbon dioxide, whether you like it or not. And until we can bring science in a special way to recycle carbon dioxide, and unless those things happen, let us enhance that which is natural. And we have started a journey as a government, a journey which I'm proud of, a journey in the energy sector where we have said, let us use that which is natural. And I want to commend the minister responsible for that, for leading that charge. That which is natural is our sunlight. We have it in abundance. And we said, by the year 2030, we will be telling those persons who produce the oil and the gas and what's not, and the barrels that come to our shore, we ever so welcome, we tell them ever so welcome, we what you call it. Because we ain't conflicts after 2030. We are utilizing our sunlight. Those areas that we can utilize our wind, we are saying, let us utilize that too, in a natural way. So by the year 2030, we won't be dependent on fossil fuel no more. A major step, a vision being led by our Prime Minister, the Member of Parliament for St. Michael Northeast. A vision being led, and one that Barbados can achieve and will achieve once we continue on this trajectory. What is happening, and you can also look at what is happening in the transport sector. We trust to have electrical and hybrid vehicles here as I speak. Majority of our transport, all the new buses that came in, are electrical, Mr. Speaker. A reduction of fossil fuel and the burning of our fossil fuel. So we have the energy sector working, of course, with the agriculture sector, because when that happens with the energy sector and the minister is able to increase the plant stock, you're getting more sequestration, you're reducing your fossil fuel, and from an environmental perspective, what we are doing as it relates to ensuring that there is adaptation, that we have a vibrant roof to reach program, and all these things, I am saying that Barbados is on the cusp for something great by 2030 in terms of ensuring the survival of our atmosphere. That is what we are saying. So, I know I'm speaking to the converted when I speak to the importance of trees, the importance of this legislation. Right now, as I speak, we have plant protection legislation within the town planning department, a legislation that deals with the applications as it relates to cutting trees and the size of tree that you are allowed to cut. As I speak, a tree must be over 1.5 meters in height, and in girth, it must be 1 meter in order for the application to be approved. It doesn't mean that because it's over 1.5 meters in height and 1 meter in girth, that it will be approved, but that is a prerequisite. And they want to appeal to those who are given permission to cut trees. Cutting trees is not a whimsical fly-by-night exercise. It's not getting a sword and just start cutting the trees. There is a technique, a scientific technique to cutting trees. It must be informed by science, in other words, Mr. Speaker. So before you cut a tree, you must understand the types of cuts that you will put on that tree based on the physiological makeup of the tree. You must understand the canopy and how, when you cut, how it affects other parts of the trees, so you will not kill that tree. It's like a surgeon operating on the body. You must understand which part the main veins are and the arteries. So when you're trying to cut off a limb, for whatever reason, that you won't have consequences and hemorrhage in other parts of the body. Same thing with the tree. And I saw over the last couple of days the cutting of trees across the highway. I am not pleased. And it looked like a ravaging job. It looked like something that was cannibalized, man, Mr. Speaker. When I see these trees on the highway, it hurts me to see how these trees were trimmed. I tell you no lie. I've already spoken to our dendrologists in my ministry, the lone dendrologists in the Western Hemisphere. I think that Barbados, when we got persons with disability, we must be proud of them, man. The lone dendrologist in the Western Hemisphere, I have already spoken to him, Nigel Jones, and I told him, as a matter of urgency, start a training program with the MTW, Light and Power, all those who are responsible for cutting trees in Barbados, so that they'll be educated as to the right techniques and the right mechanisms to get the job done. Because at some point in time, it may be required. But I'm saying that it has to be done with a scientific approach. That's what I'm saying. There is a scientific application to doing it, and that's what we have to use. The legislation, Mr. Speaker, sir, if I go back, Plant Protection Bill, deals with the storage of the germplasm, deals with the storage of the seeds to ensure that the biosecurity measures that we put in place to ensure that they are working, or to verify that they are working. There are certain chemicals, unfortunately, that are used. The minister spoke about them. Methobromide and other chemicals that are harmful to the environment, banned in some places, that are still being used as fumigants, as insecticides, as pesticides. I know the minister has started to look at those things under the Rotterdam Convention, those pesticides that we will seek to reduce, stop the usage, we'll start to reduce and then stop eventually the usage of these pesticides over the next couple of years, because they have harmful effects on the environment. And we have started those limpid discussions already. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, now is the time. And I must thank my colleague from St. Philip West, who has started to look at developmental scholarship. Now is the time for us to say to young Barbadians who are enthused about the sciences, let us start to put our minds, apply our brain to the alternatives, to the pesticides and the insecticides and the fumigants. The alternatives. And when I say the alternatives, I mean the phytopharmaceuticals, man, the natural bioceutics that can use as alternatives when we are treating these plants for quarantine purposes, so that they won't be insect infested, etc. Let us use those other natural things. I spoke about it when I brought the Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan to Parliament only a month or so ago, when a person was enjoying the Yuletide season. I am saying now is the time. And I'm happy that phytopharmaceutical and that science is part of the development scholarship program that we are running in the Ministry of Education, along with hydrology and oceanography and all those types of things, those sciences that are needed right now. And I'm happy that phytopharmaceutical and the investment in that industry is part of the developmental scholarships being offered by this government, so people can go and study and come back to Barbados, where we will be able to say, instead of using these harmful fumigants and insecticides, these are the natural alternative. The extracts of this plant could be used. This is how you use in a natural way, in a biodiverse way, to treat to these things. That is the conversation we need to be having right now. If we are serious about the survival of our atmosphere, it must be part of our philosophy. It must be part of our being. We must be enamored, especially, and imbued with the spirit to protect our environment. The spirit to go there and plant trees and ensure they survive the test of time. Get our young children our young people, those that got the energy and the excitement and the enthusiasm in the dawn of their lives to be involved in these projects. And to be involved in projects and let them understand that 5 hours is just not, a phrase or understanding or concept that drop out the sky. That 5 hours means to reduce. So you must reduce that which we started in the industrial era, 250 plus years ago. Bulk waste. You must reuse those things that you can reuse. Recycle. Changing from one form to another for profitability in a circular way. Recover that which could be recovered and repair. Mr. Speaker, I know when you were a young man and you had a bicycle, you used to repair the inner, it's called the inner tube when it got a hole. By a passion, repair it. Or when Granny had a dress, a rip, you used to repair it, not the young people not trading in the garbage and then going to the dump. That is why there must be a vibrancy. I see Minister Responsible Trade looking at me, my good friend from the beautiful parish of St. James South. Looking at me because she understands the importance of us having a renewal of interest in the cottage industry. So the next things will go to the dump. And as a trade specialist, you will tell us too, you're creating more trade opportunities and more job opportunities. Out of every single ton of garbage that enters our landfill, we can create three green jobs. 3 green jobs. Imagine it. We get about 7,000 to 8,000 tons in a month, if my figures are correct. You know, if you extrapolate that, you know how much job opportunities we can have with a good vibrancy and program. That is why it's important, Mr. Speaker. Because if we understand these concepts in a holistic way, then we can start to connect the dots. We can start to connect the dots. I am saying the importance of this.
Member has 2 more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The importance of these things must never be underestimated when we are talking about existential threats. We are having species loss. Many insects and plants being threatened. Over 100,000 insects are no longer in existence. Plants, about 800 plant species being threatened as I speak. We have lost 600 already important plants that make part of our ecosystem and balance of our ecosystem. Mr. Speaker, I said already, locally and internationally, without plants, you're going to lose your biodiversity. I will end by saying, life on this earth, life as we know it, life, when it all started, some may be consecrated, they will tell me about Adam and Eve. However you choose to put it, started with biodiversity. And life, as you know it, death too, if you want to contextualize things, life as you know it will end abruptly and violently without it. I fully support this bill, and I want to thank the Minister for bringing it and give him my unreserved and unshackled blessings today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me first thank the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central for supporting me and supporting this bill. This is a subject matter that excites him. This is an age issue as well, so anything to do with age, I believe, would excite him. This dates back to 1940. This dates back to 1947. So I want to place on record my thanks to the honorable member for Christchurch West Central. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of things that we will continue to do to make sure that not only we get this bill passed, but at the same time we do the implementation process and work our way towards establishing a unit that will anchor the sanitary and phytosanitary measures and to create what they refer to as an inquiry point, where questions can be asked and answers given, and then to develop the competent authority that will manage and continue to develop this process, sir. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wish to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question that this bill be read a second time.
Second time.
All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair to allow for this bill to be further considered in committee.
Questions that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This honorable house is now in committee. Honorable member for St. Philip South.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move an amendment.
Part 1, clauses 1 to 2.
I beg to move, Mr. Chairman, that Clause 1 be amended to say Plant Protection Bill 2023. I beg to move that 1 to 2 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 be amended as aforementioned. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. He thinks the ayes have it. We know that part 1 be passed as amended. The question is that part 1 be passed as amended. All members in favor, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 3 through 16.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 3 through 16 stand part.
The question is that clauses 3 through 16 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 17 through 27.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 17 through 27 stand part.
The question is that part 3, clauses 17 to 27 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 28 to 31.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that part 4, clauses 28 to 31 do stand part.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 28 through 31 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Thinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 32 to 44.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 32 to 44 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, clauses 45 to 49.
The question is that Part 6, clauses 45 to 49 stand at part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, you say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 7, clauses 50 to 62.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 7, clauses 50 to 62 stand part.
The question is that Part 7, clauses 50 to 62 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 8, 3 to 68.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 8, clauses 63 to 68 do stand part.
The question is that Part 8, clauses 63 to 68 stand apart. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report. Report in passing.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that you do report to the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of Committees is reporting the passing of one bill with one amendment. Honourable members in Philip South.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Honourable members.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed as the Plant Protection Act 2023 and be so cited.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Seven, sir. Order number 7 has been signed to the Honourable Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Trade and Business Development, who will move the second reading of the Companies Economic Substance Amendment Bill 2023.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Barbados continues to strive to bring economic growth and development to enable our citizens to have the opportunities to be able to advance their financial and social prosperity. And one of the key sectors for Barbados is the financial services sector, which, as you know, has played a very significant role in the past. And what we're seeking to do now is to defend this sector and try to advance the necessary regulatory framework and compliance so that it can continue to serve this nation. Indeed, in St. James South, there are many people who are graduates of the University of the West Indies, etc., who've been able to find good-paying jobs in this sector, and therefore it is a sector that we would want to nourish and encourage its growth so that more and more Barbadians can find a living within the financial services sector. Now, as you know, there are constant demands for changes coming from external sources that affect this sector. And as a result, Barbados is always on a continuous role of trying to maintain compliance with these constant changing requirements. And this is one of the reasons why from time to time, this Honourable Chamber will find that we will bring various pieces of legislation to help us comply with what is being asked of us. One of the things recently was that there was a demand that we harmonize between the foreign businesses and the domestic businesses and to put them on the same taxation platform. And we did the necessary work to be able to accomplish this. Another one, which was more recent, was the request for economic substance to be present in the operations of these entities that are registered here in Barbados. Now, because of the requirement to demonstrate economic substance, it requires that there is a reporting on the activities of these entities to demonstrate that they're operating within the bounds of the laws that govern this particular sector and that they're meeting the economic substance compliance requirements that are put upon it. And so Barbados is obligated to be able to report on these entities that are registered here to demonstrate the transparency of the compliance by companies and also to demonstrate where we've had to place penalties on entities that have not quite met the requirements for operating in the sector. And what this does, this requires the transfer of data. The transfer of data between our domestic jurisdiction or entities here and to transfer this data to the jurisdiction where this particular company is resident, where the beneficial owners are resident. And this is to enable their jurisdiction to be assured that they are complying with the regulations and to minimize the incidence of tax evasion. Now, the challenge for Barbados was that in this era of data protection, you can't just get up and transfer people's data in that way. It was absolutely necessary that we put in place the legal framework to allow our units here, which would be the International Business Unit, as well as the Barbados Revenue Authority, to give them the authority and legal cover to be able to transfer data between our jurisdiction and theirs. And so, one of the things that this will accomplish, this particular amendment to the Companies Economic Substance Act, is that it will provide the legal authority for the Revenue Authority to be able to transfer data to those jurisdictions. And so what we have is a very brief amendment that is to be inserted in the Companies Economic Substance Act. And what we have here is a bill that will amend that particular act to insert at Section 9 the following. This will allow for the exchange of information for certain fiscal periods. And it provides that the director, that would be the Director of International Business, shall provide to the Barbados Competent Authority, which is the Barbados Revenue Authority, the information filed pursuant to Section 8 by a resident company for the fiscal period commencing in 2019, 2020, or 2021. Where the Barbados Competent Authority, that is BRA, receives information from the Director under subsection 1 relating to a resident company, the Barbados Competent Authority shall, in accordance with any law or international agreement relating to exchange of information, exchange full details for each fiscal period of the resident company to the foreign competent authority of the country in which a holding company, the ultimate holding company, and the ultimate beneficial owner of the resident company is resident. And with the insertion, Mr. Speaker, of this particular amendment into Section 9, it will then give the authority for the Barbados Revenue Authority to do all that is necessary in terms of the transmission of that data so that we can be in compliance with the international rules governing the financial services sector. So I want to publicly thank the officers working in our international business unit and the ones working in the Barbados Revenue Authority. Mr. Speaker, these are people who work very, very hard on defending the sector as well as advancing our interests in this sector. These are not 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 workers. Mr. Speaker, these are people who work late on evenings, work weekends, whenever there is a need to do so, whenever there's an emergency, to be able to keep this particular sector afloat for Barbados. And so I want to publicly thank them for this effort. I want to thank them for their commitment, because without it, we would not be able to preserve this crucial sector, which is important to the growth and the development of Barbados. So, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
Question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All the members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Clause 1?
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Companies Economic Substance Amendment Act 2023.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've come to the end of today's sit-in. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until the 7th of February at 10 a.m.
Question is that this Honourable Chamber be adjourned until the 7th day of February 2023 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 7th day of February 2023 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.
this man here on the
Man,
beach.
but I want to show the public figure, you take a picture, man, you don't want it. That picture, that one. That is not your picture. I got on here, no, the camera take $5 people in. You go all the $1 million, yes, the system.
Oh, no,
all
but
the fucking regions that work.
one, and it's picking all that dust.
Huh?
Picking all that dust.
I'm
very glad. Some of his men make after next.
Yeah. So then I'm in it.
Give me a break. Give me a standing home.
Huh? I know how, but yeah, I know how I'm going to get by. I have go by. I have go by. I have go by. Things like that. I have go by. I have go in St. Anthony. Thing was they having a thing. We did what you go by here. Jordan, you know Jordan from the Lagos. Jordan that was the bike man. You know Jordan, you know. Oliver Jordan, Oliver, he did the doing the ice cream. So I met that all cheap. They say no more. Quite think yeah, too much information. Much. My head go up fast, but
Good afternoon. Fireflies. You importing them?